Like, what more could you want than an hour and a half of Pirelli tyre testing, which means who knows where this next conversation will go, or any of the conversations we are due to have over the next 1 hour and 40 minutes. Jack Nicholls, the chance of rain is at 40%. Not going to rain then.
It's a reasonably high percentage, isn't it, of rain? Have we ever had a wet Mexico Grand Prix session? We must have done. We had a wet
2016.
race.
2015, the very first session on this circuit was wet.
Oh, and you were in it?
And I was in it.
And I was watching at the hairpin at turn 13. Took a nice picture of you.
Oh, electric.
Because I think those were... I think that was still in the days where Mark Wilkin didn't let me do free practice on the telly.
The voice you're hearing alongside Jack Nicholls is former F1 driver Jolyon Palmer.
Everyone knows who Jolyon Palmer is from his voice alone, don't they?
I mean, it's Friday night, it's almost 10 o'clock, it's extra. I feel if you're tuning in, you get to know Palmer's voice, but maybe there are some new people listening and we should not exclude them. Hey?
Yeah, you got to be inclusive to all the new listeners. You've tuned into a good session.
The BBC's chief F1 writer Andrew Benson is also alongside me, and I think over the between free practice 1 and 2, not only did we have a programme which is now already, I believe, up as a podcast. Producer Joe? No? Shoddy. Listen to it on BBC Sounds though. There we go. We've also done some chatting
and some journalism as well.
I was going to say, what have you found out?
The other teams aren't very happy with Red Bull, surprise, surprise. Contesting some of the claims made by Christian Horner in his press conference, surprise, surprise.
Oh, like what? What's the best one you've heard so far?
Well, the best one is the disparity between what Horner said they would suffer from in terms of lap time from this 10% wind tunnel reduction, which was between 0.25 and 0.5 of a second, and what one of his rivals said they would suffer from it, which was 0.05 of a second.
But they're both lying. Was there a scenario in your head?
That's a bit spicy.
Okay. Forget I said the word lying. They're both exaggerating. Red Bull are going to say they're going to lose more. Maybe they think they are. Other teams will say they're going to lose less than maybe honestly they think they are, because that's just the game. That's just where we're at with this now.
As our resident journalist, Andrew, was there...
We're all journalists now, Johnny, whether you like it or not.
You're a resident one. As the man in the know who scoops out these stories, was there any part of you that thought we would get a resolution to this cost cap debate and people would agree with the end result? Did you expect the 9 teams to think, yeah, that's about fair dues, they've done wrong and that's a good penalty? Or did you think kind of whatever they were thrown at, it was going to be, no, it could have been worse?
I actually never asked myself that question, but now you're asking me it. Of course they're not going to agree with it. Of course they're going to play their part, just like Horner's going to play his part. Yeah.
Other 9 teams disappointed in Red Bull's punishment. Well, yeah.
And it's just playing out exactly as we all thought it would.
I'm just doing journalism. I'm just reporting what people are saying.
We have a minute and a half until the session gets underway. As we said, an hour and a half on the clock. Our drivers who sat out the first practice session are back in, so welcome back to George Russell, also to Esteban Ocon, Yuki Tsunoda, Alex Albon and Kevin Magnussen. The bad news is Magnussen's picked up a 5-place grid penalty already for a new power unit after theirs failed in the first session. There's also a new power unit in there for Esteban Ocon, although his is just a recycled one and not a new one, which means no penalty there. And the crowds, Jack, have once again turned up to cheer on 20 drivers, but especially Sergio Perez.
Yeah, as they have done every year since 2015, and Perez on all the... Actually, there's huge support for Perez as well in Mexico. Obviously, not far... in Texas.
How curious!
In Austin, Texas, there's a lot of Perez support, lots of huge billboards with him on the signs as well, as you would expect. So it's kind of a double home race.
There were loads in Singapore as well. I did an event and the whole room pretty much was shouting and cheering on Perez for the win.
Really?
And then look what happened.
We won. So that wasn't even a bit. I couldn't really remember.
They're very loud when he wins. In Monaco as well, a lot of Perez fans.
Yeah.
Local boy done good.
He's a popular guy.
Session's about to start. Jack Nicholls.
Light goes green at the end of the pit lane now, and Max Verstappen is at the end and just pulls out straight away on a test set of Pirelli tyres. Basically, the drivers that missed out their running earlier on will get 2 sets of the regular tyres for the weekend to do. So the likes of...
So check the DRS, clutch was on target.
Go out on the regular tyres, so Russell and Ocon have gone out on the medium. Everybody else will only be running test tyres for this session, so we don't really know the compound, so the lap times may not be ginormously relevant. Although, in Texas, Ferrari were quickest in free practice 2, as they had been in free practice 1, and as they then were in qualifying. So, it's not entirely irrelevant.
Just to let you know, Kevin Magnussen, because of taking that new internal combustion engine, it's going to take them a while to get that sorted down at Haas, so he won't be running straight away. And the same, I believe, for Ocon. There'll be a slight delay to him. No, he's already out. The team were like, he'll be delayed. No, he's out. Esteban Ocon's out in the Alpine. Good job from the team then.
He was 4th out on track, in fairness, so maybe they just didn't have enough time to get him first out on track. For those of you syncing up, 1 hour and 28 minutes and 40, 39, 38, 37 seconds remaining, and Perez is just coming to turns 4, 5 and 6 now in the Red Bull.
Didn't Magnussen have a good race in Austin last week?
Didn't he just?
He had a great race. Haas haven't scored too many points in a while, sliding down the Constructors' Championship. He's got a grid drop already for this weekend, but at least they got a couple of points with K-Mag. Kind of overshadowed slightly by the fact that they then protested Alonso, and that became the talking point. But it was a talking point because Magnussen had already scored a couple of points and they wanted a couple more. But it was a really good drive on a one-stop from K-Mag.
Yeah, it certainly was. 13th in the championship, Magnussen, 5 points back from Daniel Ricciardo. Which, you know what, I'm a little bit surprised about. Now I say that out loud, considering how tough Ricciardo's season have been and how Haas have often seemed... This is Perez entering the stadium section.
Win similar to P1,
Really?
Well, yeah, because
He hasn't scored many points, Jack.
Well, no, evidently. But Ricciardo has famously had a not great season, so I thought he might have been... Anyway, he's 5 points behind.
That's his first point since Austria for Magnussen.
Yeah.
Schumacher has come on... well, he had a couple of races, didn't he, in the summer, Schumacher, where he suddenly scored quite well for 2 races, and then hasn't scored since either. But that's why it was Haas. They'd had such a run of not scoring, and then Magnussen just pops up in the points again.
Perez getting cheers all the way around the circuit. Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't remember Ricciardo in the points much at all.
Well, he banked loads in Singapore, didn't he? That 5th place in Singapore was the one that did it for him.
And if you look at what the car is capable of getting, I think Magnussen and Schumacher, they're kind of, neither of them have been able to do that much with the car, maybe through some of their own talent at times, but just it's not come together for them. If you look at what the potential is for Ricciardo, when you compare him with Norris has got a good whack of points, 109 points for Norris.
Yeah, but that's, exactly.
So you have to compare it against teammates. Yeah?
Well, and that's why Ricciardo's leaving Formula One most likely at the end of this season, because he's just not stacked up well at all against Norris and a McLaren that surely has some pace. It's been a gloomy season for Daniel.
Pierre Gasly to the top of the times, a 1 minute 22.186. Perez is going not quite as quick as that. Slots into second place on a 22.3, so just over a tenth slower than Gasly. Verstappen is got the fastest middle sector of anyone. He's now coming into the final sequence of corners, into the Foro Sol Baseball Stadium, and then emerging right now out through the final corner, and Verstappen goes up into second place ahead of Sergio Perez fractionally, just ahead there.
The upshifts feel quite harsh.
Copy that. We are checking.
Strange for Go Race. Yeah, the higher gear upshifts from like 5th to 6th and above. Quite harsh.
Copy that. Come back to you. Let's carry on like this.
20, I think, when they beat Red and Verstappen, and it was quite good then as well.
I was impressed that they put that out. I was impressed by Hannah Schmitz because I thought she was brilliant. She's one of she's the chief strategist, isn't she? Andrew Benson, chief strategist? One of two.
There are two strategists. Is it Will Cunningham, the other one?
Oh, yes, that's right, Will. And it's really nice to go behind the scenes because very rarely do we ever get inside a debrief. We normally just get to hear about it, but actually to go inside a debrief and understand that it was, it was a really nice access, kind of all the areas they wanted us to see.
There's a very funny social media video actually earlier of everybody, I think it was on the fan pit lane walk, and everybody wants selfies with Hannah Schmitz as she's going along, and then the guy holding the phone just shouts, "Please come to Ferrari!" which is quite funny. George Russell has done the fastest first sector of anybody. He's on the medium tyre. He and Ocon, the only two drivers out on regular tyres at the moment. Comes around and Ocon's actually just done quite a quick first sector. Russell across the line goes 6th quickest, 4 tenths slower than Carlos Sainz, who's now at the top of the times, 2 tenths quicker than Gasly. Here's George Russell's radio.
We're going so low.
Russell experiencing what everybody else pretty much experienced at the start of the session with FP1.
Track's still dirty. Russell on the mediums with Ocon. Everyone else on these test tyres. And
Flag again out of what is that, 13?
And boxes lap.
No, 10, 12.
Copy, boxes lap.
wing up to the maximum. The thin air means that you're not generating downforce around this circuit because of the altitude. So it all just makes the drivers' lives a little bit harder. It would be interesting to feel what this track's like at high downforce, because maybe the corners would suddenly flow. That middle sector might be a wickedly quick, nice S-bends at high downforce, but because it's always going to be thin air in Mexico City, you only ever get the feeling of low downforce around there.
What does disappearing into thin air mean? Does that mean you go to Mexico and you never see you again?
Nah, because luckily you still got great vision.
Yeah. I don't know where
you're one for the etymologies at the moment, John.
Well, surely that's a magician's thing, isn't it? It's a magician's.
But why would they call it?
And Daniel, what you're doing is good. Avoid light braking on the in-lap. Avoid light braking, so either stay off brakes or do big stops.
Stand vanishing. I'm not. But I just don't understand the thin air part. 1 hour and 22 minutes and 20 seconds on the clock.
Were magicians, did they start in Mexico City? And they couldn't make the same trick work at sea level?
It is Dia de los Muertos this weekend. Not magic in any way, but sort of ghosty, ghouly related.
Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
No, I'm just agreeing with you. I was just translating in case someone didn't understand
oh, sorry.
what you were saying.
Sorry.
Better than Halloween. Just saying. By the way, this session, it will run for 90 minutes, and they're assessing the softer slick compound for next year. They were doing the harder ones in Austin, so actually we might get a bit more kind of an interesting...
Yeah, 13, I feel a bit of sync up with the engine braking. A bit like in and out, in and out.
Yeah, I'm still having a look.
The lack of grip that everyone has. That's Tsunoda's first flying lap on a set of mediums as well. Russell 7th, Ocon 9th. Both slotting in just behind their teammates at the moment on the mediums, getting the first taste of Tsunoda. Nearly shoved it in the wall at turn 11. Got away with it just about. Used that runoff, which is not huge, but it's enough to slow down the Formula 1 car there before you find the wall.
Kept out of the way of the oncoming Mercedes. Tsunoda's actually going pretty quickly down the start-finish straight. Russell coming through the first sector now and does the fastest first sector of anybody. It's a Shakespeare thing, disappearing into thin air, and like a lot of Shakespeare sayings, there's not actually any real...
And you can give me your feedback, I will take notes, and I will give you the rating sheet for the Delta compound after the next one. So for now, just general feedback on that tire. Okay, I would say quite easy on the warm-up.
Anyway.
He just liked it as a turn of phrase.
I think it was Prospero's closing soliloquy, wasn't it?
Didn't you say you were in the Tempest?
I was in the Tempest, but I was Trinculo. How has the Tempest come up twice today? One's on air, one's off air.
Peculiar.
Yeah. Jack Churchill played Prospero. You don't know him. But like a lot of Shakespeare, it doesn't really, there's not actually any etymology to it other than Shakespeare said it, and now it's a thing. Across the line comes Russell, 0.2 of a second quicker than Carlos Sainz. So that is Russell to the top of the times. Tsunoda jumps up into 8th position. Sainz, Gasly, Verstappen, Leclerc, Perez and Hamilton all in the pits, 2nd through 7th.
So strut 1 over the line and cool the P on the inlet. So now your P1.
On the clock. And we will see what Verstappen does now as he returns to the pits on the test tyre. Russell at the top of the time. Tsunoda and Ocon both improving at the moment.
So last week it was everyone who were on the regular tyres ended up at the top, and that's what we got at the moment. Russell straight to the top on his 2nd flying lap. The other drivers, Tsunoda and Ocon, still trying to find a little bit of time. Russell's actually done a few more laps than that, 8 laps total, so a few flyers. He's got himself ahead of Sainz and Gasly, and those on the test tyres have all gone straight back in the pits after just 2 flying laps, exactly as they did in Austin. So just on strict run plans from Pirelli.
I love this theory from Bethany. I have no idea if it's true or not, but she asserts that vanishing into thick air, i.e. fog, would be unimpressive.
But then why do they always put smoke up when they vanish? They literally put like fog in the way so they vanish. They vanish into thick air.
But that's unimpressive. That's a magician's trick.
Hang on, guys. Fog isn't thick air, though.
Oh no, sorry.
What is fog?
Well, thick air is for oxygenated air, isn't it? It's not cloudy air.
Fog is 100% humidity.
That feels pretty thick.
It's water vapor.
It still feels thick.
Well, it is.
But in Mexico, to make Jolene's point for him, you can have it can be 100% humidity and still thin air, because it's literally thin air still, because it's at altitude, but it's still raining.
So Andrew Benson disagrees with Shakespeare.
No, I disagree with you.
No, you disagree with Bethany. 1 hour and 17 minutes and 41 seconds on the clock. Tsunoda coming charging down towards turn 1 again, as is Max Verstappen, who swings it into the right-hander.
Track will be clear, same outlap as last time, good warm-up on brakes.
Do you want a stat, which is not to do with thin air or Yuki Tsunoda?
Tell us what it's to do with, and then we'll decide whether we are. No. So 1 hour and 17 minutes to go. Tsunoda now bouncing his way through the middle part of the lap, through turns 8, 9, 10 and 11, and then onto the brakes into the right-hander of turn 12. Ferrari both in the pits at the moment. Carlos Sainz 2nd, Leclerc 5th.
I thought you didn't want the stat.
We all want it.
Okay, so I did an interview with Carlos Sainz yesterday, and which you can read on the Boosty Sport website whenever I decide to publish it, which I don't know when that is yet.
Have you written it?
No. But I did some research. I only did it yesterday, and anyway, I did some research for it. I discovered that the average qualifying gap between Sainz and Leclerc over the season as a whole is 0.124 seconds, and Leclerc something like 13.4 ahead in qualifying.
Seems about right.
But from the British Grand Prix onwards, the average qualifying gap between them is 0.0128 seconds, which underlines how much closer Sainz has got to Leclerc in qualifying over the second half of the season.
Why has Leclerc struggled second half of the season?
It's not that Leclerc struggled, it's that Sainz has just improved and adapted to the car more. What's interesting, though, is that race pace-wise, Sainz hasn't made the same step forward, I would contend. And he was admitting, actually, yesterday that he still needs to improve in the races. But it just, the point was, it just underlines in mathematical terms he really has got up closer, even if the sort of head-to-head score hasn't changed that much.
It was a bit tough for him at the start of the season, wasn't it? There was a lot of pressure on his shoulders after Imola, where he actually was hit out the rep, but he had a pretty mediocre weekend. Meanwhile, Leclerc was championship leader, running away with it at that time. Sainz spun out in Melbourne, the race before.
Did he miss a lot of pre-season testing, Sainz, or something? I seem to remember that I thought in Bahrain he was saying I haven't had much time in the car or something, but I might be wrong.
No, he did both tests. I think he just struggled. He just struggled with when he was getting in the car, and actually watching testing, you could see the difference. When Leclerc was in the car, he looked like he was happy to slide in the car on the rear end, and Sainz was just a little bit safer. You had no real idea of lap time, but Ferrari on the whole seemed a little bit more competitive when Leclerc was in the car in pre-season, and that played out in the early round. Then Sainz started overdriving, making the mistakes, piling the pressure on himself. He crashed out of Imola qualifying as well, remember, which is what put him on the back foot in the first place, added the pressure. So he did need a bit of a reset, and this is a guy that was actually
just for reference, it's making that shift change. The higher gear shifting is better.
Copy that.
Not Sainz, but what I do admire about Carlos, he's a thinking driver, he's a hard worker, he's a really smart guy. That immediately comes across when you speak to him, and I think that's what Ferrari like about him. If not maybe a future champion role, maybe it will be, but at least as a solid peddler, an established benchmark, and now he's got on top of the car. That's as a box tick really, because the car shouldn't change massively in the next few years.
It was a huge shift as well, Silverstone, for him. It was a real confidence giver. All of a sudden he found himself pole position, winning a race, and I think it turned things around for him. It just gave him confidence not only in the car but in himself. So Andrew, you talk about the stats and saying that from Silverstone it's been a different game, and that I didn't know them, but that doesn't surprise me, because in himself.
Okay, Yuki, you have the compare on the screen. This is compared to FP1, where Gasly was on soft, so he has one step softer compound. As you can see, it's quite good. At low speed, we are there, and the high speed, I believe the compound will help us.
And the car in limp home mode by the sounds of things then, and Hamilton returning to the garage. 9th quickest, 6 laps completed.
And just to underline Joleon's point for him, I said, did you know those stats? And he said, of course I knew.
Oh, you know your qualifying gaps when you're racing. There is not a chance that you don't know. There is every chance the rest of the world doesn't know, because unless you are fighting for a title or you're on the front row the whole time, people don't delve into the numbers as you do as our resident journalist, Andrew. I knew all my numbers and people didn't, and it was so annoying when I was racing. I was like, guys, I know the stats of Magnussen v me.
Okay, Max, if you let Checo through on the run to 12 and start calling your brakes.
People to look past that, and that's exactly the same with Sainz. Yeah, actually now he's doing a much better job. The problem is his race pace is still adrift of Leclerc, and we see that on many a Sunday. But he will be aware more than anyone of exactly where he's at compared to Leclerc. And again, pole last time out was a fantastic result for him that's been coming.
Can I ask what your sort of race pace was in 17? Or was it not really able to compare and stuff like that, or...?
I was a bit slower than Hulkenberg. Yeah. It was alright, a bit slow.
Okay. I didn't know, like, compared to quali, I didn't know if one was better or one was worse or one was misleading or...
No, I think it was the problem with qualifying was reflected in the race as well. There was no massive offset there.
Sorry.
The other quote, by the way, about knowledge, which has amused me in the last few days, as we watch Fernando Alonso on track, the engine noise you could hear, and this is what's reminded me of it, is after the race in Austin, I walked back with him to the Alpine headquarters straight after the race, straight after he got out of the car. And I said, how did you do it? You know, about his drive. And he goes, I don't know. And I think that's the first time I've ever heard Fernando Alonso say, I don't know.
Yeah. He's gone up to 12th quickest now as he comes across the line. Russell is on a quick lap on the soft tyre. He did 8 laps on the mediums, and now he's on a set of softs coming through the hairpin left-hander at turn 13 on the power towards the final couple of corners. On the power now, out across the line, and Russell does a 1 minute 19.970. 1.6 seconds quicker than Sergio Perez, that lap from George Russell, but he is the only driver out there on the soft tyre. Tsunoda's on a soft tyre lap. Ocon's just gone out on a soft tyre lap as well. So that's the kind of maybe the only benchmark time we'll get today, but it's difficult to read into track progression. But it's 8 tenths quicker than Carlos Sainz when earlier on today in free practice 1, so that's something.
Well, let's see. Tsunoda's on a flying lap now in the AlphaTauri, so this will give us a gauge of the soft tyre with the soft tyre. Tsunoda slithers through the exit of turn 14-15, now flat out through 17, getting to the line, and he goes second, 8 tenths away from Russell.
And that's 6 tenths quicker than Pierre Gasly, his teammate, went in practice earlier on today.
So that feels relatively par for the course then, a Mercedes to an AlphaTauri.
Jenny?
Just on Fernando Alonso, he came to you and said he didn't know how he'd done that drive. He came to me after the drive and he had his hand on his back.
I did a mistake.
Actually, it hurts quite a lot. Going to Mexico City is really aggressive on the body. I don't know if any of you guys suffer from altitude sickness. Get it so badly. So mix that into being one of the older drivers on the grid.
Sainz just had a bit of a moment coming through the S's. He has some Larry moments, does Sainz. We were talking about him out of Thinking Driver earlier on, but that Singapore one in practice was quite something, wasn't it?
He had a couple there, both Ferrari drivers.
Saudi, do you remember the ones in Saudi when he did the same corner twice?
Both Ferrari drivers are
on the
just
edge.
flat out from the work over weekend, and they have their fair share of incidents when they're doing their rapid.
Yes, Alonso though, I'm impressed by his recovery. If he's not aching after today, kudos to his physio and everyone for getting him back on track, because he's serious. I mean, that was an impressive flight and descent. It was an aggressive bang. It's going to hurt, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it would be sore. It was a big impact at high speed, and then the rattle with the armco actually wasn't so bad. It was more a glancing blow, otherwise he would have been out of the race. People come back from bigger crashes, though. He did carry on the Grand Prix, and inevitably, when you're then putting your body through load straight away in Austin, where you've got a lot of high G corners as well, it's tough, particularly when you just had a jarring impact. I think he'll be okay. These guys are so fit. They're so dialed in. Altitude sickness shouldn't bother them. It's not that high, is it? It's not that high.
Just because you've climbed... Sorry, Russell.
Load the slide him. Tyres were not in a good place.
Tyres not in a good place, says George Russell.
That's on his soft second flying lap he was trying to go, and it went good.
Just because you've climbed Kilimanjaro.
Yeah, well, that's when you start to talk about altitude sickness.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll talk about it from Mexico City. My level.
These guys have been so honed in that I'm sure they'll be fine. And Fernando Alonso, maybe a little bit bruised today, but of everyone out there, I don't think it's going to affect Fernando. And he's already looked really quick, hasn't he, earlier on?
Hamilton goes fourth quickest on the test tyre, so he's quickest of the test tyre runners on a 21.5, 1.5 seconds slower than George Russell, 8 tenths ahead of Tsunoda in second. Ocon is third, 1.2 seconds back from Russell, and then it is Hamilton. We're hitting 214 miles per hour down the start-finish straight. Not quite the, what was it? It was a 230, I think, back in 2015 and 16 when Formula One first started coming here, but nevertheless still pretty pacey down that start-finish straight. Excellent tweet from Mark. Jack shows his lack of understanding of the English language by
Quite a lot of rear locking on the initial brakes into one on the grid lap. I'm not sure if brake balance will even make a difference there. Feels more mechanical.
That's tough to take. An hour and 6
We're
minutes.
all wondering it.
yeah, exactly. Russell fast in the middle sector. Looked a bit understeery through 12. Now he comes up into the final couple of corners, and he's not going to improve on this lap. His middle sector was good, but his first sector was about 6 tenths slower than he'd managed previously, so maybe an error in there somewhere from Russell, because his second and third sectors were good, so there is more time in there for George Russell. Tsunoda second, Ocon in third place, and those are the Tsunoda's improving on this lap, as is Ocon too. Stroll and Vettel are out on track. Alex Albon's just left the pits in the Williams on the soft tyre. Kevin Magnussen, the only driver still in the garage, but obviously with the breakdown earlier on for Pietro Fittipaldi in that Haas car.
I hypothesise that the test tyres here are not entirely unrepresentative. I don't know what they're representative of, but the field is still so close. They're all on the same run plan. And you've got Hamilton on a 1 minute 21.5, Perez 21.5, Verstappen 21.5, Leclerc and Sainz both 21.6. You've still got that bunch of 5 all separated by just over a tenth of a second, just less than 2 tenths.
Verstappen's just gone in very deep on the brakes into turn 4 there, catching the left front and going straight on. It was very deep, but kept it all together nevertheless. He was he on an outlap there? I think he was on an outlap, Max Verstappen. He's just coming across the line now to start his proper flying lap. Alex Albon is coming into 4, 5 and 6 now in the Williams as he loops around.
Yeah, Checo's.
Cool down, we can do one more push. Charge the battery.
How representative they're going to be.
Yeah, Magnussen just in the car, so getting ready to go out in that Haas and set his first time. And yeah, just a reminder, these tyres for Pirelli are at softer end of the scale, so hopefully should be a little bit more representative.
There's a second and a half between Russell and Hamilton, so that tells you where an actual soft is and where Hamilton's at. Maybe he's on the soft, but he's got fuel on, or I think they've all been using DRS, but there's a set run plan that Pirelli want you to run to, and that's why it's not completely representative. But looking at how close the times are, it is akin to what we saw earlier on. Albon comes through and goes 13th on the softs, but that's just his first flying lap of the day. No, with these unmarked Pirellis.
Quite literally, just never know.
So Lance, we will need go 1 for brake balance to box, go 1 for brake balance to box. We'll stop on the marks, hold revs, and then switch off.
214 miles an hour here. So that was 12th quickest for Alex Albon, 2.4 seconds away from Russell. Russell and Ocon back in the pits. Tsunoda did a cool down lap on that last lap. Then this has been a sort of push from... No, he's pitting, that's why. It was an odd sort of lap time because it wasn't slow, it wasn't a recharge lap, but it wasn't quick by any stretch. Actually, his first sector was quick, so he's obviously been up somewhere in the middle sector of the lap there, Yuki Tsunoda, and returns to the pit lane. 1 hour and 3 minutes left on the clock. Lance Stroll has returned to the pit lane now in the Aston Martin. His teammate Vettel is up in 12th place as the McLaren Lando Norris comes around the final corner after his out. I've had a bit of a moment there coming through turn 17, usually a bit of an acceleration zone.
You do see some people drop it, either into 16 or coming out of 17, trying to get on the gas. Valtteri Bottas crashed there in qualifying a couple of years ago.
18? I think it was 18. I'm going for 18.
Is it not 19?
You broke a chassis there, didn't you?
I broke a chassis by running a curb on the exit. It was such a pathetic break of a chassis. Everyone would do chassis if they had a chassis of the strength I had in 2016.
What did they make your chassis week?
I'm guessing the chassis that Alonso was running last weekend in Austin was a little stronger than your chassis.
Oh, yeah. My chassis would split into 2. It would look like Mick Schumacher at the end of Jeddah if I had that accident, let alone trying to get back to 7th.
You look like Alex Caffey at Monaco.
Yeah.
Quite a niche reference, isn't it?
Let's target
Yeah, we are well out with balance, completely off.
Okay, copy that. We'll have a think about flat.
We're like 2% forwards on make val or something. The fronts were graining on the outlap as well. Just no bites on the front tyres at all.
Like the previous time that a Formula One car split in 2 until Romain Grosjean.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then Mick Schumacher, so a couple of Haas severages. And then before that you had John Watson, 1981, exited the second Lesmo at Monza.
That was a big one, that was.
He's torn the whole of the back off the car. That was my Murray impression. Wasn't very good, I accept. Those were his
Do you want
words.
another qualifying stat?
Yes.
This one's about Mercedes.
Okay.
Anyone who's read my Lewis Hamilton interview yesterday will already know this. But the average qualifying gap between Hamilton and Russell this year is 0.06 of a second. But from Canada onwards...
Mode push, you are good to go. Mode good to go.
So 6 times in a row now. and he's something like 9-4 ahead on head-to-head.
What made you decide to do that Canada onwards stat?
Because that was when Hamilton stopped doing the setup experimentations.
We told you to.
Did you?
We were sitting with you in the media centre, and in the commentary box, and we said, "Oh, do it from Austria onwards."
Oh, I did.
And you did, and you went,
"What happened?"
Oh, yeah.
This is great teamwork, you see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Resident journalist.
Did you ask me that before I'd interviewed Hamilton or after it?
You were there, weren't you, in the booth? Were you not there?
Must have been
we were all
after.
sitting together.
I think you're trying to I'm back on my question actually there.
Was it you? But you were there when he... Were you not?
He can't even remember.
I was, because I told him to do it, and you're going to jump in on that high quality journalism.
I said we. I said we. I said we. I said we.
I couldn't get any regrip. As soon as I brake, I reload the rear.
Copy.
Probably, yeah.
I would say that I think it's tough to say you're impressed by Verstappen, because did I expect anything else this year than him destroying Sergio Perez and being mega? No. So you know what I mean. So he's certainly not my most surprising outcome.
Well, because everybody else has just been bad.
So who's your most surprised?
So I think I would the most impressed is probably, I think I'm going to say Norris.
Really?
Yeah. After last year where he beat Ricciardo but knew whatever, this year he's just smashed out the park again. Less highs because the car isn't as good, so we haven't had the Russia things and the strong qualifyings necessarily that seem quite so obvious. But I would say doubling down on the destruction of Ricciardo has really impressed me with Norris. I thought Ricciardo would be a bit closer again. So I think Norris is my answer for most impressive. It's Norris or Sainz. It's Norris or Sainz.
Most recently for me, it's been Vettel. I know that sounds strange, but the form that he's managed to find in the last 5-6 races, I don't know where that's come from. We've spent years castigating him, saying, "Oh, he doesn't deserve a place in F1 anymore. He can't drive anymore." Blah blah blah. And all of a sudden, we're kind of coming away, going, should he retire?
I think the problem with Vettel is, I take your point entirely. The problem is he's up against Stroll, and so I predicted him to beat Stroll. In the wall is Leclerc.
Red flag, Lance, red flag. Run switch cool, keep the dust positive and box.
7, and Leclerc has backed it in big time.
What did I say about 15 minutes ago?
Yeah.
The Ferrari guys in practice sessions are win or bin, and they won in FP1 and in FP2 they have binned. Sainz had a big snap, saved it. Leclerc has just rooted into the barriers, rear on, destroyed the back of the car. That's a significant crash there from Leclerc on a Pirelli test tyre.
Unnecessary crashes a lot of the time, aren't they, from Leclerc? When you think of like Hungary Q1 or whatever it was a few years ago, and relatively comfortably leading the way in France, and he's just taking too much speed in.
Yeah, he's turned in from the curb coming into turn 7, and then you can just hear it crunch the barrier.
Are you okay? Are you okay?
Yeah.
Copy.
Just not the car.
Yeah.
Turned in, the rear end has just snapped on him pretty aggressively. At that speed, low grip, there's not a lot he can do apart from just brace for impact. And the barrier comes at you pretty quickly in those sections. Verstappen's spin was at the corner later, earlier on, and because he had a double fishtail, he managed to scrub off plenty of speed. But it's a wreckage, the back of the Ferrari now, from Leclerc's hit, and they've got a lot of work to do. It's a very unnecessary one from Leclerc.
He's standing with his arms folded, walking around by the marshals.
They don't have so many crashes in qualifying or the race, do they? The proportion of crashes that Ferraris have in practice sessions is so high compared to everyone else. It's like they get it, they push the limits hard early in practice and then hone themselves in for qualifying. Of course,
Okay, Kev, while you're coming in, any comments on balance?
A lot of front, but I mean, need a bit more running. It's not terrible.
Copy that. Thank you.
Very often go over it.
So with the red flag out because of Leclerc in the barriers, the order is Russell quickest. I'm not sure what they're singing. If anyone's got any Spanish in their logger, hashtag BBC F1.
Sounds like they're saying Alonso.
I thought so as well, but they're all holding Sergio Perez flags. Russell quickest, Tsunoda second, Ocon third, Hamilton fourth, Perez fifth. Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, Bottas, Gasly the top 10. Alonso, Vettel, Albon, Norris, Ricciardo the top 15, and then Schumacher, Latifi, Joe and Stroll and Magnussen. Magnussen's been out on circuit for 3 laps, so he just started running again when the red flag came out for Charles Leclerc, and that's going to be the end of his session. A reminder that only Russell, Ocon, and there's one more, isn't there? Tsunoda have been going out on the soft tyres. Magnussen can later on, but he decided to go out on the test tyres initially. 54 minutes to go. Jenny?
Albon as well.
Albon, yes, sorry, Albon, who's currently 13th fastest.
He's done just one flyer, yeah. Alex Albon. Magnussen out there and on a test tyre for now, just with one flyer to his name. I feel like Vettel himself is questioning his decision to retire after the last few races.
It was interesting what he said yesterday, wasn't it? It's all coming up a bit too fast now. It's starting to feel real.
Did you see the way he celebrated crossing the line last weekend?
No.
He beat Magnussen on the last few corners. It was a brilliant move. Great wheel-to-wheel racing from the two of them for points. And this was Vettel recovering from his own bad pit stop. And he was like arms, fist punching the air. Like
Wasn't
he was
the
just,
finger, was it?
It wasn't. It was honestly like he just won the race. I haven't seen someone celebrate like that, apart from winning a race, basically. It was fully punching the air as he came through for 8th place.
Also, he was right on it, right to the last lap in Japan, wasn't he? He had that drag race to the line with Alonso and just won it.
It was great.
Yeah.
And it meant so much to him in Japan as well.
Yeah.
He really felt it, didn't he?
Yeah, he really was loving that race. And there he really was regretting not going back to Suzuka again in a Formula 1 car. He did say it wasn't the wrong decision yesterday, didn't he? But, yeah. Do you know what? I'm just going to be a little bit naughty here and just throw in some speculation, and this is just wild speculation.
Wow.
Brilliant, love
I never thought I'd see the day.
I'll just headline it as speculation and nothing more than that. Someone said to me a while back, around about Monza time, that they didn't believe the whole story about, Sebastian told us he was going to retire and then we signed up Alonso.
You think this is a Schumacher 06 scenario?
Someone told me they didn't believe that a deal with Fernando Alonso could be done in 2 days.
Oh, I fully subscribe to that.
Yeah.
So Vettel's been fired?
Well, I thought
yeah,
that...
and they did it in a nice way. It was this guy's theory. It's just a theory and speculation, that's all.
I thought that could be the case. As soon as Alonso was signed so quickly after Vettel's departure, it was within a week, wasn't it? That suddenly Alonso, within 2 weeks...
2 days.
2 days it was.
2 days.
That's too quick. You have to have that in place. Obviously the question is how long before had Vettel told them. I think that was within a week that Vettel had told them that he was leaving Aston Martin.
Was that Vettel had told them on either the Wednesday or the Thursday before I can't remember, Jenny, was it Wednesday or Thursday?
I believe.
Wednesday, and they announced it on the Thursday and wanted to get it out quickly, and then one of the reasons they wanted to get it out quickly was it would flush out interest. Lo and behold, Fernando Alonso, who they had tentative conversations with in the past, he was interested. 2 days later the deal was done.
Having done the Hungarian Grand Prix in the meantime. So he was getting out the car and then just hearing only about the Aston Martin deal. Now, I'm sure there would have been talks about the Aston Martin deal, but to thrash out a Formula 1 contract is not the work of a moment.
So I had some interesting conversations around this subject as well. And whilst I don't want to lump on your speculation there, Andrew, I will lump on it slightly by saying I'm fairly confident to suggest that there was pressure put on Vettel to make that decision from the conversations I've had and the sources that have told me.
So Vettel fired.
What we should say to balance all this out, and must underline again,
says BBC F1.
Underline again, it's speculation. Vettel was close to retiring at the end of last year as well. and he was very seriously thinking about it then. In the end, he decided he wanted to stay for another year, so they did know that it was potentially on the cards. So, you know, in that way, the official story does stack up more. But and I'm not saying it doesn't stack up, everybody. I'm just saying lots of stuff gets talked about in Formula One. Some of it's true, some of it's not. This is just something that people are talking about.
And but the Vettel retirement didn't come as a shock to anyone, did it? Because of everything he's doing outside of the car now. A career in politics wouldn't shock me for Sebastian Vettel.
Yeah. And he's sliding down the grid, you know, without wishing to be rude.
And he is toe-to-toe with Lance Stroll. He's had a couple of good races, but actually Stroll was ahead of him in Austin, we shouldn't forget, before the safety car came out and Vettel got a cheap pit stop and got ahead.
Stroll was having a great
race,
actually, wasn't he?
Stroll was having a really good race.
Until he crashed.
Fine. Stroll also beat him in Singapore 3 races ago, where Vettel had a good race, but Stroll was up the road. In Japan, Vettel was very good. Had a great qualifying, chose a great strategy to get onto those intermediates straight away and hauled himself back up.
Was spun at turn 1, so was a bit fortunate that he could take the gamble.
Exactly, there's a bit of that, but nonetheless he got into Q3 and it did really well on Saturday, and normally should have had a good race. But Stroll, they are quite close on the whole, Stroll and Vettel. Qualifying has been pretty poor for both of them this season, but it's just the last couple. You just see him so reinvigorated with his driving. Maybe just with Aston Martin getting more competitive overall. And they're not just tooling around with the Williams at the back, which they were at the start of the season. And hope looks so bleak for a 4-time world champ to get back towards the front. They almost looked like they were racing points again last week, with the way that they weren't quite front runners, but they weren't a million miles away.
I think they did say that track benefited them because of the design philosophy of their car, it being at a higher rake than others, and the design concept led them in that direction. So when they got to a track like that, it suddenly did start to all sing. But I was just reminded of. There's a lot of crowd. They're shouting loudly. Lance Stroll has a 3-place grid penalty for this race, plus 2 penalty points on his licence, which takes him up to 5 for the last 12 months because of that crash with Alonso.
Harry says, Martin Brundle, Australian Grand Prix 1996, car broke in half. It's a fair point. It's a fair point, actually, Harry. Rather spectacularly. Red flag still out, 47 minutes and 23 seconds to go in this second practice session.
There's a bit of fog.
It's always quite hazy, isn't it, in Mexico City?
It's a bit of fog in Mexico City.
Smog than fog, I would suggest.
Thick air in the land of thin air.
Charles Leclerc is back in the garage now. He's made the walk of shame. All the time, actually, people trying to do selfies with him and even stop for a few autographs. I think no one on the grid that beats himself up more than Charles Leclerc when he has a big crash. He has quite a few of them, but he's really down on himself when it happens.
Well, do you know what? It's funny because Leclerc's been talking all through the last few races about how important it is that Ferrari use this last part of the season to learn lessons for next year, you know, about teamwork and not getting strategy wrong and all the things that they've done to throw away this year's champion. Actually, he also needs to learn, and one of the things he needs to learn is to not crash his car so often. Frankly, I have the highest regard for Leclerc. I have a little theory, actually. I don't know whether this is true.
More speculation. Get Benson on late night radio and kicks off.
He may even, I'll chuck this one out there, he may even be the fastest driver on the grid over one lap, but he does crash too much. And it's obviously not hurt him as much this year in the championship as Ferrari's myriad errors have, but it still does hurt him.
I'm fascinated to see how Leclerc, and I hope we see it, and I think we will see it, but how he fares in a championship fight. Because of this attitude he takes that is kind of unlike any sports person I've ever really come across. The level of self-depreciation, almost, in some ways. Deprecations. No. His value is plummeting. The amount of self-deprecation. I'm really annoyed. Mark's going to bloomin' love that one, isn't he? There you go. the amount of self-deprecation is all very well, and it's very endearing and it's very interesting. But if you're going into sort of an Abu Dhabi last year with that kind of mindset, really, I'd be so interested to see how that kind of unfolds.
I've spoken to him about this quite a lot, because he always comes to see us after a big crash. You know, he has to come into the pen and speak to the media. On many occasions on a race, if he's had an accident or qualifying, he comes out and he's really harsh on himself, and you see, you know, head down, he feels like the weight of the world's upon him, and he can't say enough about himself being terrible or hating himself and feeling this overriding sense of failure on behalf of Ferrari. But then you see him the Thursday after that, when again he's doing press, and he's right as rain again. It's kind of like it's part of his process of dealing with the incident, of dealing with his perceived failure, and then he has to go away, and then on the Thursday, no kidding, he comes back like a bouncy different man.
I think partly he's so talented that he can afford to take his losses on the chin without getting defensive. When you're as fast as Leclerc is,
it comes from a place of self-confidence, rather than illustrating a lack of self-confidence.
He is confident, but he knows his flaws. So he knows when he makes a mistake, and because he's just a car, basically, is what happens. But when he doesn't, he's taking all the plaudits because he's maybe the fastest driver out there. He's certainly up there. Is he a potential champion? You'd have thought so, in the right car with the right team. But it does mean that when things go wrong, he's not under the pressure, the scrutiny other people are on. He can put it on himself and he can be honest, but he doesn't have to get defensive when things are going wrong. In a way, Sainz had to be a little bit more defensive earlier on because the pressure was coming up, and you've got to pick yourself up a little bit more when he had the incidents in Imola, and he's saying, "Why? But come on, guys, things aren't all that bad. I did this, I did that," and you have to justify it a little bit more when you have a run of incident. And for Leclerc, I think if he had an obvious run of incidents, then you could do that. But it's sort of sporadic crashes, isn't it, through his time? And people will all forget this FP2 crash tomorrow afternoon when he goes and puts it on pole. If he puts it on pole or the front row, it'll just be another one of the archive of free practice crashes, which they're still clearing up. But it's one of those things that when you get the job done as often as he does, and you extract what looks to be the most from a car, when you make mistakes, you can put your hands up, and it's a position of luxury where your job's not under scrutiny, which many other drivers, it's a little bit more precarious when you make these big mistakes.
Dougie says Lance was only ahead of Seb in Singapore because he got lucky with a safety car. I don't remember it in quite as much detail, but that's what Dougie reckons on hashtag BBCF1. Cameron says Andrew Benson is gossip guy on the radio tonight. Get that man on Loose Women. Carrie says, have you given Benson something? Speculating about loads of things. So, yeah, 42 minutes and 0 seconds on the clock. The Leclerc car is back in the...
Stroll out-qualified Vettel in Singapore.
You reckon?
Because Aston Martin were looking good.
Yeah.
They went for slicks before they were ready. And I think I would wager to our man that Stroll was ahead.
I can tell you that he was.
Maybe he got ahead with the late safety car, or a safety car at some point. But I do think he was the stronger driver through the wet conditions.
Well, he qualified 12th, Vettel qualified 14th, and he did benefit from a good pit stop.
Who did?
The safety car, Stroll.
I
think he lost
so
away the positions
Leclerc
off
ahead?
the start, didn't he?
We're talking about Stroll and Vettel here.
What did I say?
Leclerc.
Oh, sorry. So Vettel was ahead in the opening stint, is what we're saying.
I believe so. I don't have the lap on lap.
Hey, I don't doubt that guy's intel. Dougie's intel, I'm sure, was right, and maybe Stroll got ahead with the pit stop. But Vettel did. No, Stroll got ahead with the pit stop. But what I'm saying is his performance through Saturday anyway was ahead. And fine, they were close, and in the end Stroll finished ahead. But it's also, Stroll's not one of the most highly regarded drivers out there. Maybe he will be next year, Andrew, if he goes and just dispatches Fernando Alonso. That'll just Lance Stroll's stock value through the roof.
Dispatch Fernando Alonso next year?
I think his stock has
risen,
appreciated.
Oh,
this year, Stroll. A little bit, maybe just a bit more credit for
honestly,
this year.
Stroll had good drives at Racing Point with Perez before the team became Aston Martin. Perez he's a race winner, has been established as a decent midfielder, maybe a front runner, but he's in a very, very fast car now. And Stroll sometimes would just be ahead of Perez through weekends. He's definitely got a turn of speed. On occasion, Stroll can be fantastic. Nonetheless, I don't think he's regarded as one of the best drivers out there, and that's Vettel's benchmark right now.
Would Stroll have made it into F1 with super license points?
Yeah, F3 champion.
And that's winning F3 is enough, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
There's no question talent.
Yeah.
Stroll, you know, he's good in the wet. He's good at short circuits with short duration corners. But people on the inside say he doesn't work hard enough, and that's his biggest problem. And obviously, if Fernando Alonso carries on performing at the level he has this year, unsurprisingly, he said after Austin that he thought this was one of his best seasons. But of course, that caused a bit of chortling because he says that he's done his best, whatever it is, quite a lot. But he has been performing nevertheless at an extremely high level this year. There's no question about that. If he carries on at that level, I think it's going to be tough for Stroll to get close to him. I really do.
The session goes green again in 1 minute's time. 58, 57, 56. Oh, you're on oh no, you just come back from the advert break, so there you go. You can sync up now. Verstappen is at the head of the queue, about to depart out onto the circuit. It's for people syncing with the pictures. Sky were away on the advert, so often I do a sync up during the adverts, and everyone gets very angry. And everybody queued up to get some Pirelli test tyre running in. They're very keen for it, aren't they? With the 30 seconds left on the clock before the light goes green again.
I wonder if Pirelli have asked them to get a wriggle on because they've lost so much time in this test and they want to get the data. They were desperate to get data. They had to rearrange this whole test to be in Mexico City, and this wasn't the ideal place for them to do a test in the first place, but they had no other option.
What's the ideal? What was it? Where was it going to be? Suzuka?
Yeah, it was meant to be Suzuka, which was washed out. So it was meant to be Suzuka America, and they've had to take this test because they needed to get the information and data, but it wasn't their chosen because of the altitude and
low downforce isn't ideal. It's a bit of a specialist circuit, this one. You'd want it to be on a Suzuka's a bit more run-of-the-mill, high downforce, see the tyres under maximum load or big sequences. Here, low downforce, the tyres don't work as hard. There's not a squash factor for the tyres. So often it's been a slightly strange one for the tyres, but because of the washout in Suzuka is where the tyre test will happen, they'll have to take what they can.
So 37.5 minutes to go, and Russell back out on circuit. Well, everybody back out on circuit really, bars Tsunoda, Leclerc, who's in the garage with a broken car, Alonso, Albon, Norris, Latifi and Stroll, but I'm sure some of them will leave the pit lane imminently as Sergio Perez comes around turns 4, 5 and 6 at the far end of the circuit, and then makes his way back towards and through the S's, and then back down towards the Foro Sol baseball stadium. So still difficult to read too much into the test tyres, but for what it's worth, test runners, Hamilton is 4th quickest in his Mercedes, a 10th quicker than Perez, a 10th quicker than Verstappen, a 10th quicker than Leclerc, 2/10ths quicker than Carlos Sainz. We don't know exactly what tyres they're running, but that would suggest to me that those were all set on a similar compound, considering how close they were in FP1.
Yeah, no, Pirelli set the programme, but we know that they were running the softer tyres earlier and then the harder tyres later on in the session. And it's also interesting, I think.
So push hard on this outlap to get the tyres back in.
Tyres were the Ferraris, and they were fastest in qualifying. Hamilton is the fastest on the test tyres this weekend, and Mercedes were optimistic that because this is a high downforce track and they've been basically going better at high downforce tracks, that would into the picture and give them a decent chance this weekend, and maybe that's what we're seeing.
You're extrapolating.
I am
through to tomorrow,
but it's the evening for extrapolation and speculation.
It's all coming out. Whimsical Benson.
This is Benson. We need like a
more Pirelli tyre tests.
No, we just need a Benson talk show or something like that, where late one night record an Andrew Benson BBC podcast special. I think that's doable. The Benson pod.
I feel like we should get the listeners to ask him questions.
Press oil pump button.
Answering questions if you want, and I think you guys should be involved in that as well. Throw in some questions, people. How much longer have we got of this? 35 minutes. Come on, there's plenty of time for questions if anyone's listening.
Did you sign off?
This will be a good test if anyone's listening. Let's find out.
Okay, okay. Even just say to prove that you're listening. But Benson fielding questions. We've got an Andrew Benson press conference for those of you who want to get involved.
Shane Benson's already wearing glasses. Do you take off your glasses to answer questions from the audience?
No, why would I do that?
Because Christian Horner on. I thought your serious face might be taking your glasses off.
Likening me to Christian Horner, Jenny, is that's an interesting one.
I tried Andrew's glasses on and they're really warpy in Austin. They're like, well, they're all over the place. I struggled with them a lot.
So George ahead on the low fuel part of the programme, so he should be out of the way in a couple of laps.
Alonso.
Let's
I don't even know. 34 minutes to go. It doesn't even make any sense.
No, it didn't. No.
Ricciardo over the line, down towards turn 1, and Lance Stroll has just done a lap time to put him 17th quickest on those Pirelli test tyres. Ricciardo a little bit deep into turn 1 as he comes through the first couple of corners. Not a huge amount of brake complaints in the second half of the second free practice session today. Okay, here we go. We've got some coming in. Firstly, House of Graham says, is Ask Benson a good idea? The funniest bit was...
Is it no filtered? Every question goes to Benson.
I'm not sure.
Have to answer.
The answer to that is I'm not sure. Let's find out.
Tom says, as Benson seems to know all the gossip, how serious were Lando Red Bull talks?
Red Bull were definitely interested in Lando.
Upshifts are quite harsh.
Copy, Max.
In the they were trying to get him for one of the seats at what was called Toro Rosso at the time. And
what sort of the Brendan Hartley era?
Yeah, and then but I know that if he hadn't signed that long-term contract with McLaren to the end of 2025, I think it is, Red Bull would definitely have been in for him.
So you're talking about initially when he was a young driver before he was in Formula One.
Yeah, and
Red Bull were sniffing around.
They would still be interested in him now if he wasn't under contract. Yeah, for sure.
I know a lot of young driver programmers were sniffing around Lando Norris. They were. I remember at Renault they wanted to get their hands on him, but couldn't because McLaren offered him the best package, and then he became a race driver for them. If you were Norris's manager, do you think that
Zach Brown?
Zach Brown?
Yeah, is kind of Norris's manager. Is certainly involved.
Engine water too hot, it's okay.
Back off of it, keep a bigger gap to the car ahead.
For Zach Brown's team, which I would say is locking Lando into potentially non-championship fighting machinery for many a year, unless McLaren can move to the front.
If you're Audi, you're calling Norris now, right? You're getting him on board for 26.
No, obviously not.
Why?
Because 26 is away.
Yeah, and Norris's contract ends at the end of 25.
Yeah, but Piastri might muller him next year.
I don't know. I think...
Are you predicting a Mercedes-McLaren, like Lewis Hamilton, move away from McLaren to Mercedes at exactly the right time to then get yourself into a championship-winning car? It feels like that.
Yeah, that kind of... I think if you're Audi, and we haven't really spoken about Audi much, but you've got it, but we've got way more questions for Benson coming in, so I don't need to get too bogged down in it. But I think if you're...
Discipline on the lift and coast.
Audi is it's got big prestige. Everyone's going to be looking at Audi coming in and thinking, hey, this is a chance.
They want to win within the first 3 years.
This is huge. But, you know, Mercedes came in wanting to win, and it took them a few years of stabilising, and then signed Lewis Hamilton, second year with them, they dominate. It's not going to be so easy for Audi, I don't think.
First year of new engine reg changes, they dominate, which is when Audi are coming in.
I feel like it's going to be difficult to come in and with the first year of new regs, get on top of it straight away, but they're a huge manufacturer coming in. They'll
surely be able to convince a top driver to join them.
Yeah, It'll be great having them in as just more highly competitive seats available, which Alfa Romeo currently is not.
Just an aside, very briefly, before we get to more questions for Andrew Benson, hashtag BBCF1, there is a real threat of rain over the next half an hour. Teams starting to report the chance of some drizzle incoming. So Pirelli just going, hurrah, things couldn't get any worse.
We're going to need questions for everyone in that case, aren't we?
Well, I think Audi have enough clout that they don't need to be signing Norris up now for 2026.
But all the top drivers are signing such long-term deals. That's my worry. By the time you get to 2025 and think, oh, right, better sign a driver.
Well, you're going to be 2024 first, though.
Yeah, but
with 2022,
you've got to be starting
signing a guy for 4 years' time. That's far out.
I know the answer to this one from Tom. Benson, sausage sandwich, red sauce, brown sauce, or no sauce at all?
Well, I don't eat meat sausages, Jack, as you know, because I'm a vegetarian. But if I was going to have one of my favoured brand of vegetarians...
Is there any forecast of rain? It's looking quite ominous in some places.
It shouldn't get to us.
I'm not sure this is an interesting topic.
Well, tell us the answer and we'll move on. Here's the radio.
Is there any forecast of rain? It's looking quite ominous in some places.
It shouldn't get to us.
So Latifi being told there won't be any rain.
I wish he'd come in and said red sauce or brown sauce.
Yeah,
that would have been brilliant.
A bit of ketchup and a bit of mustard, probably.
Ketchup and mustard, okay. Jago says we're really living in Benson's best era. Cameron says Benson, unfiltered, unmanaged and uncontrolled, which is good.
MC still wants to know your secret to Spa.
Doesn't everyone, Jenny?
I like your answer, very short and sharp to the point.
Are you going to get through him?
Kaylee says, Benson, you're a burglar, but you only steal things to slightly inconvenience your...
Braking looks good, Daniel. Braking looks good. Keep working on that.
Understood.
I don't know, they won one of their socks.
Christian Horner's glasses, surely.
Emily says, how will Piastri perform being the only rookie on next year's grid without having driven this new car?
Well, the Piastri-Norris thing is one of the most interesting questions of next year, isn't it? And it's a ballsy call by Mark Webber, actually. I had a long chat with Mark in Singapore about that whole situation. And he couldn't believe the mess that Alpine had got themselves into, by the way. He was quite entertaining. I couldn't possibly repeat some of the things Mark said. But yeah, he's never been one to do things by half measures, Mark Webber, has he? He has big accidents and he has big wins, and he's gone big on this driver contract for his protege, and it's a big call because Norris, as we've just been discussing, is a difficult guy to take on. But maybe that takes the pressure off for Piastri a little bit, because Norris has performed so well. People might cut him a bit of slack, give him a bit of time to ease into it. The only problem is you've then got to actually catch up. So
I don't think the slack exists. Van Dorn should have had some slack going up alongside Fernando Alonso, but he's out of Formula One, not to return. I don't think their slack exists when you get to Formula One, especially when you come in. Dorn did as a Formula 2 champion. Piastri's Formula 2, Formula 3 champion. Huge hype about him. He's got the wind in his sails. He has to be, maybe no one's expecting him to beat Norris straight away, but he cannot be annihilated by Norris, and he's got to be a significant upgrade on Daniel Ricciardo. And we know how good Ricciardo can be. It's not necessarily going to be easy.
He's in quite a difficult situation as well.
Yep, let's have a look when the bouncing has been the best into turn 1. I tried 2 different lines.
Yeah, copy that, Checo.
And he will have had seat time, and okay, I don't think the two are so comparable in their results, but Piastri and Webber and his management team have kind of snookered his chances of being able to go out and actually drive a car this year and get some valuable experience.
Some rookies doing FP1 sessions. It would be nice for Piastri. I'm sure he's looking on at the other rookies doing FP1 tests now and thinking, oh, I'd love to be in the car getting some mileage in. But he has driven an old car with Alpine numerous times this year. He's actually had a lot of running, and then you're just backing your talent in the end, working with McLaren, getting in the simulator, working with your core team of engineers as well. And you're backing your talent through pre-season testing, which I think will be short next year as well. Might just be a day and a half for him.
Max, we need Strate.
Yeah, there's a problem.
No, it's Strate, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Still got just under 25 minutes to go.
What are you expecting from Piastri?
I don't know. Like Norris seems to be such a megastar that it's going to be really tough for Piastri. But he's won everything so convincingly that I think you mix Schumacher having a lock up into the hairpin at turn 13. I think you have to expect a lot from Piastri. And that's where someone like Joe comes this year or last year and you think, yeah, pretty decent in his junior career, might be all right in F1. He comes in, he's all right, gets closer and closer to Bottas, and he's solid and decent. Whereas Piastri, you're kind of expecting.
How many laps do we get?
Targeting 5 on each set, Lance. 5 is the plan.
Going to be super because there isn't really evidence to back that up. When there's only evidence that Piastri is the next Leclerc, Norris, Russell, it's tough to think that, or it's tough to give him any slack on that front because he's kind of earned the right not to be given any slack. He's kind of, punished by his own success in a strange way.
The hype is huge for him.
Yeah,
that's the problem he's got. Sonoda came in with a similar record to Sargent.
Yeah,
I would say similar level of drive, a similar expectation. I'd say he's probably got a better record than Joe coming into Formula One.
Yep,
Sargent. Certainly maybe a bit more promise. But still, you're thinking, if he can get close to Albon, that'll be fine. And anything else is a bonus, really, for Sargent. He's not coming in with huge expectation next year. It's a plan for a longer run, and hopefully he can develop and be similar level to Albon. Whereas Piastri, McLaren are signing him. They've gone through everything, all the scandal of signing him. Well, not the scandal on their part, but the rigmarole of it, because they think that he's a guy that can push Lando Norris all the way. And if McLaren have 2 Landos in the car, they're cruising past Alpine to 4th in the constructors.
Well, that's a very interesting point about the McLaren Alpine battle because, Alpine with Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon is a very different proposition from Alpine with Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. And I know that McLaren are looking at that Alpine driver lineup and thinking that might be our chance to beat them again next year if they do this year, because they think it's going to take another year before they can start moving forward in competitiveness when their new wind tunnel comes on stream.
I think they'll have 2 tenths in drivers. Alonso's been ahead of Ocon pretty consistently this year, even if he's behind in the points. Everything seems to be going against Fernando Alonso in terms of scoring points this year. Reprieve that he managed to keep his 7th place last time out. But he has been ahead in qualifying. Ocon's had his moments where he's been very good, but overall Alonso's been leading the way. And I think Gasly is a similar level to Ocon. It'll be interesting. That'll be a match-up for next year as well, the all-French team. But I look at Norris and the potential of Piastri. This could be the best lineup in one, for all we know.
Well, that's a big claim because Russell and Hamilton for me is the best driver lineup in Formula 1 at the moment. And you'd have to be going some with Norris and Piastri to be better than Hamilton and Russell, I think. But
yeah, but in the not the first year, the first races, but in time, Norris has done such an amazing job. Norris or Russell. For me, I'd still maybe angle for Lando as well. As George has done a good job this year. And then Piastri could be a megastar. He's got all the record of a Russell or a Leclerc. We're looking at maybe megas lining up for McLaren.
Indeed. And by the way, on Russell, just as a parenthesis, we're talking about the qualifying stats between Russell and Hamilton and how it's been edging away from Russell in the second half of the season. That's because Russell's just lost confidence in the car. One of the things Hamilton was saying it was a really nice image actually in the interview that myself and 3 other journalists did with him in Austin, was describing Mercedes handling. He says it's a bit like creeping up behind a horse. You're never quite sure when it's going to kick you in the face.
Creeping up behind a horse.
Yeah, when it kicks you in the face, it's really going to hurt. And Mercedes engineers saying that Hamilton's better at dealing with that inconsistency and unpredictability from the car than Russell is. And he's just lost confidence, Russell.
Creeping up behind a horse is scary stuff.
You done it?
Yeah, and they always, you think you're sneaking around the side, and they always just back around, so you're still behind them. You're just waiting for the kick, and they could be more than sore.
We've got some more Ask Bensons to get to. Dr. Sam, thank you for your kind comment, Dr. Sam. But also asks Benson, if you could be any part of an F1 car, what would you be?
I have to be honest, these are not the kind of questions I was expecting.
They're exactly the kind of questions I was expecting, and I'm here for it.
I don't know.
What's your favourite part of an F1 car?
I don't have a favourite part of an F1 car.
Do you, Jack?
Is that a thing?
You have a
I'd be
favourite?
the Halo.
What? The saviour. Palmer the saviour. I would probably be... I do love a side pod. I do love a side pod. I don't like that Mercedes have taken away the side pods. I love the big wide side pods of that 1990 Ferrari. I'd be a side pod of a 1990 Ferrari.
Then you'd be a work of art.
Thank you.
Because that car is literally in the Museum of Modern Art in New York.
JP says, ask Benson, what does M&M stand for?
I've got no idea.
Other sweets are available. I searched, apparently it's Forrest E. Mars Sr. and Bruce Murray. Those were the two people who came up with M&M's, so their surnames were
Who
M&M's.
thought I might have that in my locker?
JP. Not this one, but a different one.
And not his dad either. Or unless it is your dad asking that question.
Who knows? I don't think... oh, this is good. Chris says, how about calling your show Benson's Burner? I like that. Doesn't really make much sense, but it sounds like Bunsen burner. So, and it's asking the burning questions. So I like it.
Burning the midnight oil.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many options. A few people saying it should be called Benson for Bed for a late night podcast. Other bedding shops are available.
Forbid.
Yeah, pretty much. 17 minutes and 51 seconds to go in the second free practice session.
Have you seen Simon's question? He's eating very, very buttery toast at the moment whilst listening to us, which is nice, thank you. And he says, so Benson, favourite late night snack?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. Someone did ask what you had for dinner, but we'll move on from that. What's your favourite late night snack?
It's all about mood, isn't it? A late night snack. Yeah, my wife likes a bit of sourdough with garlic rubbed on it and olive oil, and
garlic bread. You could just say.
Well, it's more of the sort of Spanish way of doing it, you know. And if you rub a bit of tomato
on it as well,
you know, the Catalan
pan con tomate.
Yeah, that. Yeah,
delicious.
Yeah, they're quite bread.
Okay, Kev, brakes are starting to get hot now, so could we have 50 metres lift and coast at turn 1 and turn 4, please?
Copy.
You never said what you wanted, though. You're avoiding the question.
I'm a humble guy.
RW Clip says, Palmer, in terms of what car would you be, Palmer would be a tyre. Gets replaced most weekends. It's true. I think he means commentary-wise, not F1, as in like we replace him every weekend. We're not talking 17 here. I'm pretty sure he was just referring to this weekend. 16 minutes and 20 seconds to go. I thought it was witty. I thought it was funny. Because we have to replace you every weekend when you don't...
No, it's very good. It's very good.
It's probably worth pointing out as well, if people are wondering, literally nothing is changing on track at all. The times are all still the same as they were, and nothing's happened since Leclerc's crash. And
no one's improving. No one's done a personal best in a lot since the session restarted. So this is fine, everybody.
We're making Tom hungry, though, and he said his shop shut 12 minutes ago, so he can't go out and get snackage. Sorry, Tom.
Shame. I'm scrolling down to see... So Tom says, how confident, if at all, are Mercedes that they can be back or near the top next year? How confident are they, do you think? Not you, not us.
Well, Hamilton said it would be difficult, didn't he, to turn this car into a winner, but they're going to do their best. I think that quote kind of sums it up. They're hopeful, but it's a big gap.
Phil says, how many drivers can Benson name that their first podium was also their first points? 15 is the target.
No, I can't do that.
Hamilton?
Hamilton.
Villeneuve retired, didn't he?
Magnussen?
He'd be one of them, though, Jacques Villeneuve, for sure.
But did he? But
Villeneuve finished second.
Did he? I thought, but he had an oil leak.
No, he finished second.
No, but he was leading, but had an oil leak.
Yeah.
Okay, so Villeneuve, Magnussen, was that true? Maybe. Yeah.
But yeah, Australia.
Was that? But he didn't stand on it, right?
No, Magnussen did.
Oh, he did.
Ricardo got booted off it.
Ricardo got booted off it.
Jensen didn't get to stand on it and never stood on a podium in Australia, even though he got a podium in Australia. Is that right?
He won Brawn 2009.
He also won with McLaren in 2010.
Yeah.
Failed.
And 2012.
Take it all back then.
Okay, so we're on 3. Maybe we don't bother with this. This felt funny at the time. Not the whole Ask Benson thing, but naming 15 drivers whose podium is their first points. Well,
that's a bit out there, that one, I think.
Pippa says, love it when the gang are back together. Benson is your best feature yet, along with Benson Speculates. So, Matt says...
I'm waiting...
On the straights. Yeah, copy. On the straights. Also car out of the slit stream to Russell ahead.
He's got some thoughts.
Stay tuned, everyone.
13 minutes and 47 seconds on the clock. Leclerc, the only driver not driving currently after crashing in the S's and wiping the car out. Russell still quickest on the lap time, he said on the softs earlier on today. Second, Ocon third.
Benson, we in a car when I asked the question last week about will Leclerc be a Ferrari driver forever, or could you see him going elsewhere?
I was not in the car when you asked that question because I had my car in Austin, if you remember.
I do, but I didn't know if somehow we were giving you a lift.
6 miles away from you guys.
I know. We were on the right side of town.
You were.
You dealt with it
on the wrong.
You dealt with it chirpily enough.
Yeah.
I didn't complain at all, did I?
So much so he's complaining a week later.
But do you know what? On the subject of Charles Leclerc and his future,
And if you want to build a gap, then let's do it before sector 3, just to avoid any of those issues.
I would be trying to line up Charles Leclerc right now for when Lewis Hamilton retires.
Do you think he is?
Wouldn't be surprised. He's a smart guy, isn't he? But there's Leclerc and Russell, so I don't think Verstappen's ever going to Mercedes after all that's happened in the last couple of years. I think Leclerc and Russell, that's a hell of a driver lineup for Mercedes.
Do you think Leclerc could be convinced? It feels kind of Ferrari through and through a little bit.
I think right now he's Ferrari through and through, but a couple more years like this and he might become Fernando Alonso on Ferrari. He won't be quite as cross as Fernando Alonso was, but he might lose faith.
If you're Leclerc, I know Ferrari has the prestige. He's come through the Ferrari Academy. He's got long-standing ties there. But you look at Mercedes and what a force they've been for the last decade. That's a lure in itself. And even this season, the way that Ferrari started as championship leading and have ended up being maybe just behind Mercedes overall, or certainly similar to Mercedes right now, is one weekend Ferrari is the challenger, one weekend Mercedes is the challenger. The development rates through this year have been in complete contrast. I would have more faith. I believe next year Mercedes have a better chance than Ferrari.
Really?
At the moment. Just historical precedent. Maybe, hopefully Ferrari can prove me wrong. And it would be great to see them mount a championship challenge that can last the whole season. But it's just been such a long since they did it. There's been so many cracks in everything that they've done this year. Everything. The strategy, the reliability. The drivers are not exempt as well. Stops. Nothing has been championship level from Ferrari this year. Performance of the car was, but it's tailed off. The development's not been good enough. And I'm looking at Leclerc, and if he wants to be a champion, I think, personally, Mercedes are probably the stronger option for the future.
If Mercedes come out next year with a decent car, like if the testing happens in Bahrain a week before the Bahrain race, it's only 3 days, but if somehow they manage to claw back a chunk of time, you've got to fancy them going forward. If Red Bull now have the cost cap ramifications to deal with a lack of CFD, a lack of wind tunnel time. I just feel like if I was Leclerc, I'd definitely be keeping my options open.
No one is, though. No one's keeping their options open. Everyone's set with tying up really long-term deals on mega bucks.
This is why I'm saying about Audi. You got to crack on.
Yeah, but it's too far in advance. You'd think the world can change in 4 years.
Wise words.
Well, it can. So why are you trying to lock in a Formula One driver when so much can change? Too much can change.
The engine sounds strange at Patrol Trotter. Let me know if all is okay.
Okay, mate, no problem so far.
Sounds strange on par throttle. Fair play to F1 TV for trying to give us a bit of drama there, or a bit of something going on in the session with Ocon having the car sounding strange on partial throttle and the team saying it's okay.
So earlier on this season, or over the winter, there was rumours of the cost cap, including driver salaries, from a certain point.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the reason drivers wanted to lock in really long-term contracts on big money. So Verstappen signed this, 7-year deal? Norris, a multi-year deal. 4 years, 5 years at McLaren? Because they're
got to lock in your mortgage before the budget.
Kind of exactly that.
Don't jest.
And that's part of the reason you don't want to be suddenly left contractless.
So what you did last lap was really good, so exactly that was last lap.
And I think that's part of the reason that we've got these huge money deals, locking brilliant drivers into the current teams for such a long period of time.
And that's gone away now, all that talk, because I think they realised they couldn't do it because of restraint of trade or something.
But the deals are done.
Yeah.
So we are set with kind of what we have in the most part. Mercedes keeping their line up. Hamilton now talking about a new multi-year deal. Quite frankly, at the moment, if Hamilton wants it, he will have it at some point. Verstappen will be at Red Bull for many, many a year. Leclerc at Ferrari, and Norris is in a McLaren. That's your big four drivers, isn't it?
Yeah,
all tied in.
Ocon has returned to the pits, but so have Russell, Tsunoda, Verstappen, Norris and Ricciardo as well. Just getting a replay of Norris coming through turn 13. Very slowly.
Okay, so mode in, box this lap. Cool the brakes as much as you can, please, Kev. Cool the brakes as much as you can on the way in.
He basically couldn't really bother to do turn 14. So that's the highlight of the action that we've had so far. Jen says on hashtag Ask Benson, but we'll open this up to all of you, of course. Does Verstappen need to win a championship with another team in order to be respected in the future? That's often a question that gets thrown around. Do we look at drivers who've only won with one team and it matters?
There's absolutely no lack of respect for Max Verstappen's driving abilities at all.
Let me turn it round. Would we respect him more if he won with another team? I'm going to say yes.
Probably, and I mean, obviously, this is not me saying this, but out there in the wider world, there is definitely a bit of, well...
So especially just a little bit more to the right. Just straight after the bridge. You can then go left for your king and turn in, but a bit more to the right, just after the bridge.
Everyone accepts that mistakes were made at Abu Dhabi and the race shouldn't have ended in the way that it did, and everyone accepts that Red Bull have broken the budget cap this year. But also everyone accepts that Max Verstappen is fantastic and every bit the deserving world champion in both those years, even if Hamilton would also have been a deserving champion last year.
But some people that would dismiss some of Hamilton's achievements would say that he only won in Mercedes. Okay, he had the McLaren year in 2008, beating Felipe Massa's Ferrari on the final corner. Dramatic. But since then, he's only won in the Mercedes, which was the best car, categorically, in the years that he drove.
Up against Bottas, and Rosberg even beat him once.
With the exception maybe of a 1 or 2 years of Ferrari had a decent car, but through driver or team made many errors. I do think it elevates the driver to go to a different team and win in a different environment.
I'm not sure who has the most world championships with different teams. Is it Fangio?
That's what I was going to ask. I don't know.
think Fangio has four different manufacturers for his 5 titles.
Correct.
Mercedes, Alfa Romeo,
Maserati
and Ferrari.
Yeah.
But that obviously was the olden days, 1951, 8 or something in that period. So modern day, I'm not sure.
Alonso's about 3 points away from having 3 different teams: Renault, Ferrari, and McLaren.
Which is probably why, again, it's so well respected, even though he's won his 2 titles with just one team and a long time ago.
Prost, how many did Prost win with?
McLaren and Williams.
Never won with Ferrari, did he? No.
No, but again, with Renault, if Renault had spent some money on the part that kept breaking in 1982, but they refused to spend money on changing it because it was done by an external supplier they couldn't break their contract with or whatever, then he would have won in 82.
Anyone could have won in 82, though.
He could have had 90, couldn't he? In the Ferrari.
Yeah, and he could have had 83 as well if Brabham hadn't found that fancy fuel in the last 3 races.
They were the days when big names used to swap teams.
Yeah.
A little bit now. A little bit too stable for my liking.
Is it because, and we touched on this in the preview podcast in Austin, but is it because you know who the big teams are now and it won't change? Whereas in those days you could go from Renault to McLaren or to Brabham or to Williams and you'd have or Ligier, or you'd have no real idea who was going to be quick the next year, I guess. Presumably Benson, they'd be the favourites or something, but year on year it seemed to change.
Yes, but actually the winners didn't change that much, did they? Even then, you've got Ferrari winning in the 70s, split by, you had Lotus and Ferrari, then it was Ferrari and Williams, and then it was Williams and Brabham, and then it was McLaren and Williams, and then it was McLaren and Ferrari. Same names keep coming up, don't they?
If you look through the history of the Constructors' Championship, which I did after Red Bull took their first in since 2013, you do see the phases, the cyclical. Wouldn't ask Jack. Cyclical nature of it.
You can tell you where the word comes from. Or can he? Anyway.
A cycle, because it goes round. But you do see the trend of certain teams getting to the front, then it's basically a fight normally between 2, maximum 3 of a decade, pretty much, with some interlopers in the Renault years. Mostly it seems to be that. I think the field spread is bigger now. The gulf is bigger between the front and the midfield, it feels like. Or maybe it's just the fact there's more races. The best inevitably come to the top through sheer weight of odds.
It's a cycle. Hashtag BBC F1, have you got that reference? Yellow flag in sector 3, everybody. 2 minutes and 20 seconds to go. And there's a yellow flag out there in the 3rd sector. I think it might be Joe. I think Joe might have come to a halt in the stadium section at turn 13. But we'll wait for confirmation on that. Yuki Tsunoda's just coming through the S's currently and down towards the stadium section. And it's Joe. He has pulled off by the looks of things. Red flag.
Yeah, we've got Mr. Never more than out laps in front of us. Yeah, exactly. Let's see if he changes.
Really good. Ask Benson this. I'm excluding family here as well. Who is Andrew Benson's other favourite Benson? Ashley Benson, George Benson, or Dave Benson Phillips?
None of them.
So who's your favourite other Benson that isn't related?
Here's Joe's radio.
Yeah, stops the car.
Hydraulic failure.
Stops the car now, Joe. Immediately stops the car.
So Joe being told to stop the car. He only had one more corner to go to the pit lane, so that was quite urgent, I think, in the end, from Joe.
Yeah, you can end up doing a lot of damage to gearbox at that point. When you have hydraulic failure, you lose any ability to change gears.
They had a gearbox issue at the end of free practice 1 as well.
Red flag.
Red flag.
Yeah, so cool the car formation lap style, and we're boxing for a live pit stop. For a practice pit stop.
Copy. Is it in the last sector?
Okay, let's
Just
not
to know
cool
where
the
they
car. Let's not
hill
cool the
is.
car. Yeah, come back in. Respecting the red flag.
Copy. No, but where's the incident?
Turn 13, 14, right ahead.
Copy, copy.
He's stopped on truck.
I'd say by about 99%, too much has been covered in this. I'm still waiting for one final Benson speculates.
Yeah, what do you got, Benson?
I've got no
What
more.
were Ferrari doing in 2019? Amit Mandalia wants to know. Give us a Benson speculation with the engine.
I think everybody knows what they were doing.
What were they doing?
It was to do with the fuel flow meter, wasn't it? They were getting more fuel flow than the others.
That's not speculation.
That's what Mercedes and Red Bull believed. The FIA, just to clear this up, the FIA said that they didn't believe the Ferrari engine was being run legally at all times in 2019, and Ferrari categorically denied that and say yes it was. But Matteo Binotto did admit in an interview with me earlier this year that they were pushing around the grey areas of the regulations.
The fuel flow makes a big old difference to the as was proven.
Yeah. We'll get into that one in FP3. Checker flag out, well, the red flag out, session comes to a close. George Russell quickest, a 1 minute 19.9. Yuki Tsunoda second, 8 tenths further back, with Esteban Ocon third, 1.2 seconds back. Those were the only drivers to, well, not the only drivers. Albon in 13th used the soft tyre also. Hamilton fourth for Mercedes, fifth for Sergio Perez, sixth for Max Verstappen. Leclerc, Sainz, Bottas and Gasly, the rest of the top 10. Alonso, Vettel, Albon, Norris and Ricciardo, the top 15. Stroll 16th, Schumacher and Magnussen 17th and 18th. Don't think that Magnussen ran the soft tyre in the end, even though he would have been allowed to, and Albon only did those 3 laps on it in the end.
Kind of did the same last time out in Austin when they had a replacement and then didn't run the soft either. So
yeah, Latifi 19th and Joe was 20th quickest before he stopped on circuit and now wanders down the pit lane back to the Alfa Romeo garage.
So that is the end of running for Free Practice 2 and for Friday at the Mexican Grand Prix. Hopefully you've enjoyed this slightly peculiar session, but it is late night and that's what we love. So thank you for your interaction on hashtag BBC F1. We've hit some highs, we've hit some lows, it's fair to say, but possibly not as low as Charles Leclerc. Jolyon Palmer, he had a decent Free Practice 1 and he finished second, but that's a costly error for him, no?
Well, I think he'll get over it from the driving point of view. He's missed out some mileage on the Pirelli test tyres. He's missed out a fair amount of laps, only 13 on the board before he crashed, compared to about 36, I think, was the highest total of anyone. Valtteri Bottas, his teammate, did 34, so he's missed about 20 laps compared to Sainz. He'll get over it. It's more just workload for the mechanics. Does the car get put back together absolutely correctly? It should do, but this is where mistakes can creep in.
Benson, Friday gearbox, I'm guessing?
For sure. Yeah, I think he'll be okay. I think he won't be happy about having crashed the car. He'll be apologising to the team. He's that kind of person. Nice guy, Charles Leclerc. Felt fully embedded in Ferrari. Loves them. Loves being there.
Until he goes to his in a few years' time.
But to emphasise, that's what I think Toto Wolff should be trying to do, but not saying that it is happening.
So what do you think he should be trying to do?
Once Hamilton, what other driver lineup would you use to go alongside Russell after Hamilton retires?
Many say Norris.
Yeah, there's Norris too.
I think what the two have shown us.
Anyway, I don't think it'll hurt Leclerc either, really.
The two sessions, the only evidence suggests it's going to be really, really tight, and maybe it won't be. But the evidence, that's all the evidence
I agree,
says.
and I think there's two. One, it's a high downforce track. Ferrari are really good at high downforce, so why wouldn't they be strong? They've been quick on one lap at least all season. It's a high downforce track. Mercedes are strongest on high downforce tracks, so why wouldn't they be in the picture in the race as well?
And what I like about Mexico is a short lap as well. 4.3 kilometres, 17 corners, sort of 4 sections really. A couple of chicanes, the faster sweepers, and then the stadium section. So even if Red Bull have the best car, or whoever has the best car, the gaps are never going to be so much that a mistake in qualifying doesn't cost you more than just one grid position, potentially.
Well, qualifying gets underway tomorrow at 9 p.m, so you can listen 5 minutes before that. Free Practice 3 will get underway at 5:55, and then the race coming to you 8 o'clock on 5 Live on Sunday evening. And the clocks change this weekend, they go back. So
Do they?
Uh-oh.
I actually hadn't realised that.
Oh, we're in a world of pain.
That's some crucial info. Thank you.
You get an extra hour's sleep. So loving life at the moment. As I said, thank you.